Welcome to the Military Justice Today podcast with your host, Robert Capovilla and Mickey Williams, covering the full range of military law topics from all branches of the armed forces. Today's episode is made possible in part by the law firm of Capovilla and Williams. And now, let's welcome the hosts of the show, Rob and Mickey.
All right, everybody, here we go. Another episode of Military Justice Today. I'm Matt Starosiak in the studio outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And what a great pleasure it is today to have these two gentlemen sitting at the podcast table with me. I've got Mickey Williams and I've got Dan Higgins. Hello, gentlemen.
Matty Ice, how you doing?
Hey, Matt.
I'm doing great. No Robert Capovilla today. Can you believe that?
It's a rarity, man. I don't think he's ever missed one of these.
I have a great desire that we should be talking about him when he's not here.
Very well.
Well, we're not going to talk too much about him, but we are going to make him feel bad because we're going to talk pre-show. We've got a great episode on tap, by the way. We're going to talk about the Coast Guard. We're going to talk about how some of the due process issues are different in the Coast Guard. We'll talk about some current events as well. But we always do a pre-show topic, as our listeners know. And since Rob loves Ohio State so much, we're going to make a point to talk about their national championship while he's not here.
OH.
So, Dan, you are also a very staunch Ohio State Buckeye fan, are you not, sir?
I am. My mom's whole side of the family's from Ohio. My brother still lives there. I've been raised on the Ohio State Buckeyes.
And so you not only watched their run as leading up to the national championship game, but you and Rob went, right?
We went, right at the end of the Texas game. I was up in Charlotte for litigation, and I was watching the game in my hotel room. And I mean, when Jack Sawyer picked up that fumble and he's running down the field, I mean, he didn't even get to the touchdown. Rob's already calling me, get tickets, right? So we got
because the game was in Atlanta, which is our home base.
Ohio State Buckeyes, in our hometown, national championship. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
So you guys got the tailgate. What did you do? You went in the tailgate? Because Rob had some people in town from Ohio, right?
Yeah, we had some Ohio folks down here. We went and tailgated. We went to a great steakhouse prior and then walked over to the game. It was a great night.
It was freezing, though, wasn't it?
Oh
was
my
that
God,
that cold stretch that we had here?
That's one of the coldest I've ever been in Atlanta or in the South. I mean, it was windy and it was super cold. But it was an incredible game. Notre Dame knew a couple days prior to us that they were going, so they snatched up a lot of the tickets. So when we went in there into the stadium, I mean, we were surrounded by Irish. I mean, it was Rob and me, and we're decked out in Ohio State jerseys and gear, and we were surrounded by Irish. To their credit, as they were getting wrecked the entire game, they were very, very professional.
Yeah.
Good people. Rob told me when he went, a couple years ago when Ohio State played Georgia, he was getting like barked at, by grown men, so it was a great game. It was a really amazing experience.
He was getting barked at?
Yeah, the Bulldogs.
But the Bulldogs.
Grown men barking at him. Yeah.
So irritating.
All right, cool.
None of that with the Irish. It was cool. It was a great experience.
So was being there better than you thought it was going to be, or about the same? Or, I mean, obviously that's your team. It's in your hometown now.
Yeah, it was surreal. It was surreal. I mean, that's your team. It's in the national championship at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and they won. It was incredible. Rob and I sat there afterwards, and everybody had left. And Rob and I were sitting there in the bleachers, and we're watching Ryan Day, and the guys hoist the trophy. It was cool. Yeah.
Mickey, did you watch the game on TV?
No, I didn't watch the game.
Why is that?
I didn't give a crud about that game. You know why? Because I'm a Duck fan, and I was all pumped about Oregon being number 1 and going 13-0 and doing all this stuff. And then they get smoked. They get freaking smoked.
That Rose Bowl game was
by Ohio State, and I was just like, oh my Lord.
I really thought Oregon had the best team in the country.
It looked like they did for a long time.
Yeah, well, it doesn't really matter. You lose in the playoffs, you're out. And that's what happened, so I did something else. I don't even know what I did. I just know I didn't watch the game. I had no interest in it. I mean, I was happy for these guys. That's awesome.
I was happy for them, too.
Yeah, that they got
I wouldn't admit that to Rob if he was sitting here, but I was actually quite happy for these guys.
Yeah, and they had a great time. I mean, because you're right. It only happens, for Rob, it's happened 3 times in his life, right? That the Buckeyes have gone to the championship. But how often do you get to go to the game, right? And not only that, getting the tickets are tough, and then you got to fork over quite a bit of money too. So, and then it's an investment to get down there and stay down there. And it sounds like it was kind of a miserable weather experience, but I'm sure inside the dome it was.
It was nice
temperate.
inside. Yeah, no, all in all, it was completely worth it.
Good.
That's a great stadium too. I mean, they're having a lot of stuff there. Obviously, it seems like every time you turn around, there's something at Mercedes-Benz. But it's a great stadium inside. So good for you guys. Well, congratulations to your team. Any predictions? Any final predictions on who's going to win it next year?
Let's run it back. Jim Knowles went over to Penn State. Penn State's looking like a decent team. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. But
Chip Kelly left too. So
yeah, and that's expected when you win the championship. Folks are always going to get poached to go out and do bigger and better things. Chip Kelly going to the Raiders, and so we'll see.
So you think Ohio State? That's your favorite?
Yeah, let's run it back.
What about you, Mick? Your team's supposed to be pretty good. The Ducks, right?
Listen, this has been our curse this whole time. Oregon will do great during the season, and then they just completely blow it when it matters. So I don't know who's going to win it, but I doubt it's going to be Oregon, even though I love them. But it's just been that way. I know I hate to be a Debbie Downer about it. I want to be rah Oregon, but that's just how it's been.
Hey, man, I'm a Michigan State Spartan. I don't think they're going to win it. So I think, honestly.
Well, I would agree with you on that one.
I mean, Rob likes to say I'm a Michigan Wolverine, and I just play into it. But in the end, I'm a Spartan. So
he's so easy to get going.
He's so easy.
And he's so sensitive about it. It's like, and I love Rob. Okay, he's like a brother to me. But if you say, I think, what was it? Kirk Herbstreit came out and said that Ohio State fans are lunatics and all this and that. And Rob took it personally. He was attacking him. I'm like, it's whoever Kirk works for. Is it ESPN? Maybe.
Everybody these days. But
I don't know. He's a big star, but I'm like, dude, he's not talking to you, Rob. Like, he's like all ticked off.
Herbstreit had to move out of Ohio because every time he picked against them or said anything against them, people were after him in Ohio. So he actually had to move his family out, as a story I heard.
Yeah, it sounds
which is a shame, and then it doesn't. It kind of makes sense that why he would say that about their fans.
Yeah. If you had to
move
flee.
your family, you got to flee. All right, gents. Well, what a great conversation. We'll put that one to rest, and we're going to talk about the Coast Guard today. A lot of stuff going on since Trump has moved back into the White House with respect to the Coast Guard and their senior folks. And then we're going to talk today's episode, I think, though, Dan, it's mostly going to be differences in procedure and processes and maybe even culture when it comes to military justice and the Coast Guard. I know you're going to share some information about some cases you've had that I think our audience will find interesting. But where do you want to start that discussion at?
Yeah, so the Coast Guard is in the news right now because President Trump fired Commandant Fagan, basically. He removed her from position because of her policies on DEI and, her positions, right? Not only did he remove her from position, but it just came out, I think today or yesterday, that he kicked her out of her home on Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. Like,
good.
Move out within the next, couple days.
Way. Get out of here.
Yeah. And so, look, it's no secret. We're not a fan, right?
Yeah.
I've been at war with the Coast Guard for the last several years based on a number of cases, that we'll get into today. But, the Coast Guard's in the news right now. And it's because of a lot of these policies. And actually, one case that I have right now is actually being put on hold because of, President Trump and the Pentagon's policy on DEI and anti-harassment training and all of that. And so basically they're putting a pause on all these cases to say, hey, we need to go back and take at least 60 days to reinterpret this guidance and determine what it means for these cases, right?
That's a pretty amazing concept when you think about it, when you're dealing with somebody's life being at stake, right, Mickey? Yeah. It's like now you're going to go back and revisit this idea, which sounds great from a legal perspective and an academic, but you're talking about people's lives, right?
Yeah, it's great for Dan's client. I mean, could you imagine? Because my understanding, I've had a few cases in the Coast Guard, not a ton, but a few. My understanding is, this is talking about boards, even if you win the board, like if you win the board and they find that misconduct didn't occur and they say, retain this man, retain him, the person at the top can say, no, I disagree. We're kicking him out anyway. Right. And it's like, what's the point of the board? Like, that's crazy to me. So I'm happy for that this is happening because I hope it's going to put more fairness in there and it's going to help the Dan's client and future clients. And they have to undo some of the brainwashing that's been going on in the Coast Guard for at least 15 years. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and to give you some context here, every other single branch Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. All right, if you go to an administrative separation board or a board of inquiry, right, where they're determining whether to kick you out of the military or not, okay? Basically, if they come back at the end of the board and they, looking at the findings and recommendations worksheet, and they say, hey, we do not believe these allegations are supported by a preponderance of the evidence, we recommend retention. Every other branch that is binding on the commanding general, it's binding on HRC, PERS, whatever branch, right? It's done. They cannot kick you after that. Now, in the Navy, if they come back and they say, hey, we find that, a couple of these allegations are supported by preponderance of the evidence. However, we still recommend retention. That is not binding. That can go up to PERS in the Navy, and they can override that. Okay, it's similar in the Army, right, to where if they find, hey, you committed these offenses, right? We find that this happened by preponderance of the evidence. We recommend separation, but we suspend the separation for a period of 6 months or whatever, a year, right? Which basically means, hey, if you don't get in trouble in the next 6 months or a year, you're good.
Yeah, it's a probation.
Probationary period, right? That is not binding. And the commanding general can override that and separate, right? So there's little caveats there, but generally...
But those are different than what you're talking about.
Totally different here because, generally, if they find no misconduct occurred and we recommend retention, it's over.
Yeah.
The Coast Guard is the only branch, if you can even call them a branch at this point. They're kind of their own animal, right? With Department of Homeland Security. But they're the only branch that you can go into a board and the board says, we believe that these allegations are not supported by preponderance of the evidence. Therefore, we recommend retention. It can then go up to the 06, to the captain, up at PSC, right? The Personnel Support Command, whatever it is. And they can say, hey, we disagree, right? We disagree, and here's why we're recommending separation.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to talk about this case.
That's complete BS to me. I mean, they weren't there at the board. They didn't see the evidence presented. They didn't see the witness on the stand get impeached or whatever it was. It's so absurd that they can do that. It's so unfair.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mick. I mean, it seems illogical and irrational.
Well, why even have the board?
Well,
just go right to the person who's going to make the decision anyway. So what do you want to do, sir, ma'am? Oh, kick the dude. Like, why go through this whole process? Why torture this guy? Give him hope just to dash it because for some political or personal reason, you think that person should be kicked out.
Yeah, it's a deprivation of due process. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and we're not law school professors here by any means. Although, Mick, I think you taught a class with Robert at one point, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
So you're quasi tenured.
It was like an adjunct thing.
There you go.
And yeah.
But how does that happen in your guys' opinion? Just from doing what you do, how does it happen that their process and procedure is so much different than the others and it's kind of allowed to stand?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, it's the regulation. It's written that way. It allows and empowers, those senior folks to unilaterally remove someone from their ranks, right? I think it's an entirely corrupt process, right? And so I want to talk about this case as an example because this happened to my client. Great guy, served over 17 years in the Coast Guard, no history of misconduct, right? Just an outstanding coastie, loved by everybody that worked with him, right? Basically what happened here, and I won't get into the specifics to protect, ongoing litigation, but basically what happened here is that you had a group text with about 8 guys, right? And in this group text, and they were reservists, right? And so they would text in this group text when they were at work, at drill, and they would text, when they're, off duty.
Personal cell phones?
Yeah, personal cell phones. This is not the official work text. So if you wanted, hey, be at, the headquarters building at 09, this uniform, this was not the text to go to, right? There was a separate text thread where you would have all your official guidance come out, right? This text thread was just the boys. Right. And yes, did they get a little inappropriate on there, sending some, inappropriate stuff, some memes and everything like that, getting political, talking about sexual stuff? Absolutely.
Inappropriate.
Right. Yeah.
I suppose if you're like at the
Yeah,
the water cooler, maybe.
So
but
you wouldn't want, everyone seeing this. This is a trusted group, right? And I think we all have.
Yeah,
it's like
I'm familiar with those kind of text strings.
100%, right? 100%. This is.
I bet you are. Man.
Yeah, we all have them, right? We all have them where we probably wouldn't want this text thread out in the public.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's got
It's
them,
not
right?
criminal, but it's not. You
It's
just
not
don't want that
criminal at
business
all.
out there.
Right. It's personal.
These are just guys hanging out, broing out, man.
They're joking, with each other, and anybody that's served in a small unit, culture in the military understands that the humor is sometimes depraved. It's dark. You have gallows humor, right? Anybody understands that, right? So the point is, though, is that basically one of these guys that was added into the group text later in the thread, right? He made an allegation against one of the other guys that was totally separate later on. Well, CGIS, which is the Coast Guard's law enforcement agency, it's like NCIS or CID, they do an investigation and they stumble upon this text thread, right? Doesn't have anything to do with the allegation that was made, but they stumble upon this text thread, and the kid who made the allegation, separately, then says, well, actually, you know what? I was offended by these texts. It did, I think that this was actually sexual harassment, despite the fact that this kid was actually sending porn links and memes and everything in there. Total willing participant, engaging in this humor. Thought it was hilarious, right? It's banter back and forth.
Man, what a scumbag.
Absolute scumbag. They put this before the command, and the command says, you know what? We're going forward with separation against all of you.
Yeah.
All 8 of you, you're all gone, except the kid making the allegation, right? So really, it's about 7.
He's getting a nice job.
Yeah.
A nice base.
He probably got promoted, this guy.
Yeah. So they all 7 of these guys face separation, right? And so as we're preparing for this board, I'm talking to, some of these other guys' attorneys, because some of these other guys' attorneys, they're, local criminal defense guys. They're not familiar with the Coast Guard or, military law as much. So we're all working together because, we have aligned interests, right? We go in there and litigate this board. So out of those 7 guys, every single guy, the misconduct was founded and they were recommended for separation, except my guy.
What's the misconduct, though?
Sexual harassment. I'm going to get to that. So mine was the only board where we actually won. And what happened was,
wow, look at
your
you.
guy had the Blue Jay.
No, so here's the thing. We had a fair board. We had a very fair board who listened to the law, right? And I had to lay this out for them and define sexual harassment for them to help them understand what sexual harassment actually is, right?
Yeah.
And it's a 2-part test, right? Would the objective party, would the reasonable person be offended by this? And was someone actually offended, right? So you can't just look at it and say, oh, the reasonable person, that's inappropriate, right? A command looks at it and says, oh, no, this is inappropriate. No. The second part of that test is someone actually has to be offended, right? And at the time that those texts and everything were sent, no one was offended.
Right.
It's very, very simple, right?
So he was doing like a retroactive.
There is no such thing as retroactive
Clutch
sexual
my
harassment.
pearls.
Right, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So at the time that those messages were sent,
Everybody was
offended.
good with it.
Everyone was good with it. And we had every single person come in there and testify that they were actually good with it. We even had the accuser come in there and testify, on cross-examination that, actually, at the time, I didn't say anything about it. At the time,
Really? He actually said that.
He had to.
Is this your heart emoji on
100%.
this?
It was literally
Really?
that. He's hearting messages. He's sending all these sexual memes and everything like that. And I confronted him with that, right?
Yeah.
You sent all of these things, didn't you? Yes, I did, right? So, the board completely agreed with us that, look, there is no such thing as retroactive sexual harassment, right? At the time the message was sent, he was not offended, right? This is locker room talk. Maybe it's a little inappropriate, but it's not the official work text, right? This is, guys out in their personal lives texting, right? In a private thread that nobody else was going to see. No members of the command are going to see.
Simple enough to remove yourself from it if you really don't like it.
Yeah, and it's personal cell phones. Like you said, this is not the official work text. They're not
your
doing
work
it
phone.
from the government phone.
Yep, not work email. So here's the thing. So they come back. The board says, hey, this misconduct is not supported by preponderance of the evidence. We recommend retention. Okay. So then it's this year-long saga of going up through the ranks, through the 05s, through the 06s, and it's absolutely political, right? They know everyone up there at Coast Guard headquarters is watching and going to, review whatever their recommendation is. So despite the fact that the board recommends retention, the command says, no, we recommend separation, right?
Wow.
We disagree with their analysis. Then it goes up to PSC, right? And the captain up there picks apart the board's findings, despite the law being very, very clear, and says, I disagree. I believe
is this a lawyer up there or no?
No, they'll have a legal advisor, advising them on the law.
Yeah.
But they didn't even cite the law. They didn't even cite sexual harassment. And my guy was accused of sexual harassment. And then in their reasoning, they cite hazing, something completely different, right, than what they alleged to begin with. Mm-hmm. It was just the most discombobulated, legal analysis I've ever seen. And they ended this man's 17-year career in the Coast Guard based on a group text.
And how long after the board cleared him did this happen? The actual separation?
About a year later.
Yeah, so the guy's in limbo, right?
Absolutely. He's sitting in limbo. He went up to his commanding officer and hey, sir, what's going on here? What's your recommendation going to be? Despite the fact that I've laid out my case for you and you see the, findings and recommendations of the board. And he said, I'm likely leaning towards separation here. Right?
Wow.
Absolutely political, absolutely corrupt, total deprivation of due process.
So then what happens?
He's separated.
And there's no recourse. That's it. That's final. There's no additional level of appeal or anything.
You can go through an appeal after the fact, but that's going to be through the corrective military records group.
Yeah, it's not going to give him his retirement back.
Nope. And so
he lost his retirement too.
Yeah, he lost his retirement.
Wow.
He lost his retirement over a group text.
Yeah.
And so the point is, and this is important for Coast Guardsmen to know and understand, right, that the command is not going to help you here, right? And if they want you gone, right, you better buckle down and hire an attorney who really knows what he's doing or she's doing so you can go in there and fight at the board and hopefully you defeat their argument well enough to where they can't then go forward and separate you.
All right, question. And maybe you can't answer this because I know there's only so much you can disclose about it. But on a scale of 1 to 10, because I could think of some text messages you could get, there could be some content that you could put in a text message that would justify just about any punishment, right? I mean, we could think about pretty, really some bad things. But on a scale of 1 to 10 where 1 is totally appropriate and 10 is the kind of things people should go to prison for.
Oh my Lord.
Where was this stuff at, Dan?
Look, I was raised in the infantry. I served in the infantry and special operations. I may be hardened to this. I think we're around a 3 or a 4. All right.
So not the kind of stuff.
No. There was, what was funny actually is I'm cross-examining one of the witnesses on it, or actually I'm cross-examining the accuser. And I had to actually kind of pinch myself not to laugh as I'm quoting the text message.
That's actually funny.
It was hilarious. As I'm reviewing all this evidence, I'm laughing to myself in my office, right? Because it is hilarious. And so I was trying not to laugh to myself as I'm quoting what was written in there by him.
Yeah.
And so, no, it was a 3 or a 4. This should have been a counseling, right? This should have been maybe a local reprimand to, hey, look, this wasn't an official group text, but the things that you said in here may be conduct that is detrimental, to good order and discipline, right? You could articulate some sort of argument like that, but it's a local counseling, it's a warning rather than not only going to end your career, we're going to take your retirement from you.
That's crazy. Mickey, your experience you've been doing this a little while longer than Dan, your experience with the Coast Guard, I know they don't make up the bulk of the cases at Capoville and Williams, and, you were an Army lawyer for years, but your experience with the Coast Guard kind of the same? Like the procedural and the due process stuff is let's just say challenging at the least?
I will say I've never done a separation hearing in the Coast Guard. I've only done trials, and they were all out of Alameda, California. There's a base there. And
that's where I was born.
And what was interesting, I actually thought the judge was not bad on those cases. I will say I thought it was a little weird. One of the judges had commissioned a artist to come in and draw the judge during the trial. I'm like, what is this?
Sketch artist?
Yeah, I'm like, what is this about?
That's
okay.
strange.
But as far as the trials go, I mean, they do get, Rob has a crazy story about a 412 issue that came out and the judge was getting it completely wrong. And I will say the Coast Guard is one of the services that gets overturned the most. In fact, I think CAF came out and even said that the Coast Guard has no business doing military justice. I can't remember which case that was. It was pretty funny. It's probably true. But I would say if what I don't like about this administrative hearing is there, and Matt, you kind of touched on this, is do they have a legal advisor? So what I see here is a couple of things. I see sour grapes from the lawyers who prosecuted the case saying, hey, we won 7 out of 8 of these and we just lost this one. This ain't right. So they're probably saying the board got it wrong because we won 7 out of these other 8, even though it was probably just a bad board.
and on its face, that's a defendable position. Yeah. I mean, on its face, before you dig into the facts, 6 things happened and 1 didn't. I mean,
yeah. So I could see the command being persuaded by that, saying, well, maybe they did get it wrong. But to do what Dan said is try to create allegations that didn't occur are crazy. And I also see this problem because those commanders, upper level commanders, know who was on the board, and they just all got overturned. And now those gentlemen and ladies who are on that board have to be thinking, "Oh crud! Did I just put a bullseye on my career?" So I see a possible chilling effect on the people who do serve on the boards in the future in the Coast Guard. That would be completely I mean, they're just going to do what they think the command wants.
What a great point. Because at that point, you're no longer talking about just that client. You're talking about those folks who ultimately answer to that command, right?
Right. So I don't I wish it was more fair or fairer. I think that's right. That's the right word. But right now it's not. Hopefully it will change. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're not under the Department of Defense, like Dan had hinted at. They're at the Homeland, what is it?
Homeland Security.
Homeland Security. So they have a completely different way of doing things.
But they also still apply. It's like, they have one foot in both arena. They still apply the UCMJ, but then they have DHS regulations.
I didn't even know they weren't part of Department of Defense.
Yeah.
They used to be like under the Department of Transportation. Something like that, it was wild. But yeah, that's what they fall under. And so when you go in there, it's a little different. And what else is interesting too, is they do have a pretty close ties with the United States Navy, because I'll do a trial in the Coast Guard, and oftentimes my co-counsel will be a sailor.
Yeah.
not a coastie.
Yep.
So it's like they don't have enough people doing the defense work, which makes me think that they don't want their guys to get legal representation in the Coast Guard on defense work. Maybe they don't want those positions because they're worried it might hurt their career, so they just augment somebody from another service. Could be that, I don't know. But yeah, the Coast Guard's got some serious problems.
Wow. Additional thoughts, Dan?
No, I just
You've got some other wacky Coast Guard cases going too. I know you can't really talk about them, but can you tell us generally on some of the stuff?
Well, a lot of them have been
bizarre?
paused. A lot of them have been paused because of this new policy that came out right now.
So what do you think
on anti-harassment?
Let's not talk about your case specifically or cases, but what do you think is going to happen with these pauses? Do you think these cases are going to go away? They'll be dismissed, or do you think it's a temporary pause and they will move forward? What do you think is going to happen on some of these pause issues?
No, given the Coast Guard and their behavior and the way that they carry out a lot of their military justice actions, I can see them trying to say, all right, you know what, we can't go after him for that because of this new policy. I'm going to change it over. We're going to go after him for this.
Yeah.
Right. They're going to find a way basically to go after folks. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that, they do the right thing by their service members. But it's incredibly concerning for, Coast Guardsmen across the country that may find themselves accused of misconduct, right? That ultimately at the end of the day, there aren't administrative processes to protect them.
Yeah.
Right. Like the other branches have. And so I think in a much larger sense, it's going to be interesting to see what President Trump and Secretary Hegseth do. We've already seen it quite a bit, right? That, just today, West Point is removing all of their, like these DEI specific groups that they have, like these clubs that they have at West Point. You can no longer be a part of clubs that, identify you as a minority, right? Or, a female or, whatever it is, right? So I think there's some good and there's some bad there, right? I think there's, and that's a whole different topic entirely, but I think that we're going to see change, whether it's good or bad, change is coming. across the military.
Rob and I talked about this in an earlier podcast that we recorded, and we both kind of said, well, some of it's going to be good, some of it's not going to be good, but you're right, there's going to be change, I think, throughout the U.S. military for sure.
I'm looking forward to it, man. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. Yeah, dude.
It'll be entertaining, if nothing else.
Yeah.
It'll be entertaining. All right,
well,
guys.
hopefully okay, I've been ranting on this for years. Hopefully the one change they make is unanimous verdicts. Oh, I hope they bring that.
Great. Yeah. That'd be great.
Well,
we can all agree on that.
There's some great things that they might be able to push through. This might be the right timing for it, and unanimous verdicts would be one. We've talked about the others many times before, but any parting thoughts on any of these issues? Otherwise, we'll wrap the show up.
No, hey, thanks for having me on, Matt, to talk about this. I'm very passionate about it, and hopefully we can revisit this down the road with a more positive outlook on the Coast Guard, and hopefully they get it right.
I think it's great, and I don't know how open your client would be to coming on the podcast and talking. I would love to ask you what his reaction was to it and how he felt and all that. I think those are things that he'd have to give us permission to do, so maybe extend the invitation to him. But it just crushes me sometimes to hear what happens to these folks, especially the kind of person you describe where he's got 17 years in, no history of misconduct, a good dude.
Really good dude.
And it's just really, really unfortunate because in the end,
all good dudes. They were all great dudes.
Yeah, and in the end, it's a text message going on a bunch of guys who are all participating in it.
So dumb.
I mean, you're not even talking about a sexual assault. You're not even talking about it's a shame. But
be careful.
Yeah, well, be careful, right? Be careful, and tell your sons and daughters that are in the military.
I mean, be careful. These guys, it'd be like me texting you, Dan, and then it's just wild.
Can you imagine what those look like?
Well, I was just thinking, imagine what the text messages between like SEALs are. At SEAL Team 6, I said like pictures like, hey, check out this guy's brains or whatever.
I noticed that, the group text, they get smaller and smaller. And as the group text becomes smaller, it becomes a little bit more,
craziness.
Litigator club.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in, gentlemen. It was great to have you here. We'll say hello to Robert. We didn't talk too bad about him, but thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. Until next time. Signing off on the Military Justice Today podcast. Take care. Be safe.
Thanks for listening to the Military Justice Today podcast with your hosts, Robert Capovilla and Mickey Williams. This show was made possible in part by the law firm of Capovilla and Williams. For more information or to listen to more episodes, visit militaryjusticetoday.com.